Hey guys, how's it going? It's your boy MKS here, back in another video. Excuse me. Hope you're well wherever you are. And as ever, I'd love to hear what you think about this video, especially football fans, and in particular Torino or Italian football generally. But yeah, please post any comments you want, and I hope it won't be too cringe-worthy. Yeah, please check out part one if you haven't done so. And this is a continuation from part one for anyone who's stumbled across this video. And as I often say, apologies to any of my current subscribers or whatever, or new subscribers, or people who already watched my videos before. This is for any new people who might have stumbled across this video. I often do these list videos and break them up into 3 parts, so hopefully they won't be too long. Anyway, I'll try not to waffle, and again, please do leave your comments. I appreciate your likes and sharing of the video and subscribing and things like that. So yeah, here goes. So number 11. I would love to see what the Italian government or politicians, including the new Italian government at the moment, and politicians generally in Italy, even rival politicians, maybe even working together, even though they're rivals, and councillors can do to help to make Italian football great again, things like that. So doing things like helping clubs like Torino, possibly offering lower taxes, or looking at what funding they can give, or looking at what Italian football clubs like Torino or the Italian league itself, Serie A, can learn from from other countries, like other leagues and other teams, and other teams in other leagues generally, and even teams in other sports or even business or other areas from life that they can learn from the world that they can learn from. So yeah, hopefully they'll learn that learn that thing, what hasn't worked or has worked for other countries, like what they've done well or not so well. Also learning from like the EPL, the English Premier League, like how to market the league better and things like that. So yeah, hopefully teams like Torino would benefit. But yeah, basically, as I say, I'd love to hear what the Italian government and politicians and those involved in politics generally in Italy could do to help the club. Number 12, as I mentioned again in part one, I think it'd be great if so many companies invested into Torino, and it'd be quite interesting. Like someone was mentioning about Man City when they were bought out by the City Group. Like, I don't know what the strategy was behind the City Group, but to buy Man City. But some people say that they just saw a club that was up for sale that they could use to promote their business or whatever for PR purposes and things like that. I'm not sure if that's true or they had a specific strategy. Like, I think there was one argument that what they did, they saw that Man City wasn't a big team, but they could turn it into a big team. So I thought it'd be quite interesting if that happened as a fan of Italian football and Celtic. I thought it'd be quite interesting to see if businesses did that for Torino, and especially what they went through with, which I hope to come to, which is like the Superga air disaster. I know Man United went through a similar thing, to be fair, but I'd say I'm a bit biased towards Italian football, so it would be pretty interesting, I think, for companies, as I said before, and I think like Tata Torino or Tesla Torino, YouTube Torino, or even Google Torino, or Toyota Torino, or Tony Elumelu Torino, or even Tony Torino for sure, I think. Or even if the Tony Elumelu Foundation worked with Torino, I think, and even help the club set up its own foundation if it doesn't already have one. I think that those have quite a ring to it. Again, I'd love to hear what you think about each of these ideas or each of these points. Like, do you agree with me that Tata Torino has a ring to it, or Toyota Torino has a ring to it? Again, I'd love to hear what you think. Which was your, like, Tesla Torino, Toyota Torino, Tata Torino, or Tony Elumelu, or Tony Torino? Which of those do you think sounded least cool, and which do you think had more of a ring to it, or sounded more cool? I'd love to hear what you think about those, and that sort of thing. And also, especially if you're an Italian fan, would you find it interesting if a big company came in and transformed an Italian team into like a super giant, and see how far they can take that team to win, hopefully? I'd love to see Italian teams win more in European or international competitions. So I'm not too interested in like the domestic trophies so much, but more in the European or international competitions. Whereas with Celtic, it's kind of like the opposite in a way. Although I would also like to see Celtic do well in Europe as well. At number 13, I hope to also possibly find out some more ugly or negative facts about Torino, and perhaps listen to some of the rivals as well. If like Juve fans or any fans who for whatever reason don't like Torino, I'd like to hear from them as well. So I hear both sides of the story, even though I'm a fan of Italian football generally, and I generally wish to keep it positive. And also some of the negative, some of the issues the club faces in terms of turning it into a superpower in football. Like one of the worries I have as a fan of Italian football is if new owners came in and invested in Italian clubs, how long would it take for Italian clubs to do a lot better in Europe and challenge the English and Spanish clubs, which are doing a lot better in Europe or have been doing better more recently? So yeah, I do worry if it would. I wonder how long it would take to do well. Number 14. On the subject of the problems the club faces, I would love to hear like any solutions or what they could do to improve their club, and also what problems they could solve through like having a foundation or things like that. Again, hope it comes out in more detail. Number 15, I'd love to see, as I say, what the club can do, if it can go far in Europe, if it can get into Europe in the next few years, and then if it can win, especially if it had a lot of investment. As I say, number 16, I'd love to hear what are the best ways to help Torino. I think having sports clubs and academies around the world would really help to develop good players, but also help the PR of the club, or like its brand value, basically, and things like that. I suppose it's all connected, PR and brand value and things like that, by having more fans around the world, just like Man United and other teams do. Man United and Liverpool and teams like that. But yeah, I'd love to hear what are the best ways to benefit the club. As I often say, I think, as I generally say, really, that I think that having more investment nowadays normally is what drives football teams to do well. Arguably, I think having co-owners or people, multiple shareholders, I think would be quite interesting. It would be an interesting concept because they'd have even more money, but also even if some investors pull out, they still have other investors. And sorry for repeating myself. I know I do mention this point a lot of times, but I know a lot of football fans don't like the fact that this, or even people who are not interested in football, probably them even more so, don't like the fact that there's so much money spent, or especially if it's not spent on your club if you're a football fan. But they don't like there's so much money being spent in football. But for me, I find it quite interesting because I find even when they're not playing, I find it interesting to see who's going to buy a new club and what sort of players they're going to buy and things like that. And I have these ideals, like I'd love to see an Italian team, possibly Rome or Torino or something like that, having like what used to be the Galacticos for Real Madrid. I would love to see an Italian team have so many great players on the same team, and I'd love to see the best possible managers, coaches, players, and that sort of thing. And whatever else makes a great football team, I'd love to see that in Italian football, in Serie A generally, especially. Again, I think investment would help to bring all those things, like best managers, coaches, players, and things like that. And I'm sure if one or two managers and coaches go to Serie A, many more would probably follow suit because it'll be a much more competitive league, just like the Premier League and La Liga are at the moment. Number 17. I'd love to think about an imagination about, as I normally do with my vivid dyslexic imagination. I would love to imagine like if all these companies like Tata and Tata and Tony Elumelu and Tesla and Twitter, maybe even YouTube itself, possibly Google, who owns YouTube, invest in Torino. I'd love to see how much money they could spend, what sort of players they could buy, and things like that. Number 18, I'd also love to hear positive facts about the club, possibly like if it has a foundation, like what sort of work it does. And again, I think it'd be great if the fans also donated to the club, if they had like a bank account where the fans could donate, but they knew that money was going in to buying better players. So if 1 million fans got together and even just gave like a tenner each, or the equivalent of a tenner or whatever, €10 or whatever, £10 or €10 or whatever. I think it'd be interesting to see. Like, obviously that'd be £10 million, which would mean they could. I know nowadays you probably can't get many players for that much, but it would go into making the club better. Obviously, if several million fans donated lots of money, I think it'd be interesting if they could buy one or two players with those, or at least invest in the academy, or maybe even do both. But also like doing stuff with the foundation to make the world a better place, as I often say, and things like that. Number 19, I would love to see Torino again having a foundation, and possibly if people like Tony Elamelu and others invest into the club, big companies and all that kind of thing, they could donate quite a lot towards helping African software developers. But it could also help the club with its PR as well as those companies, and help, as I say, help Indigenous, African, and Australasian software developers. And number 20, also helping Indigenous, Africans, and Australasians, preferably both, in STEM generally. And also, I think it'd be great if former players, like people like Francesco Totti and people like that, who played for the club, would donate, like maybe even Batistuta. I think he played for the club for a while. But former players. Totti played for Roma, sorry, I got that completely wrong. But yeah, former players, whoever played for Torino in that was a cringe-worthy mistake. But glad I made it towards the end of my video. But yeah, I think it'd be great if former players invested, like donated to the club and had their own academies, which they could feel good about and maybe use for their PR if they run businesses or whatever. But yeah, I think it'd be great if former players ran founded their own academies, and also coached younger players as well, their skills, so they could pass on those skills, and that sort of thing. So I'd love to hear on that note about any former players who played for Torino who I might not have heard of, or any facts about Torino, like the badge, logos, what the name means in English, or things like that, any sort of facts, what people can mention. And I am out. Peace and love.